always had that something in you where you wanted to strive for better. So describe for me, what has your journey been like in life?
The journey it's been very hard because, I was on public assistance, so it was like, at first it was a boundary there. Anybody knows about public assistance, they only want you to go so far, or they're going to cut it off.
When you describe yourself now, tell me, who's Freddie Stevenson, the man that you are now?
A few years ago, I remember in college, they would always have speakers come in and ask us who we are. I wouldn't have been able to answer the question. It probably would have had something to do with football. I'm a fullback for Florida State. I want to play in the NFL. But now it's just simple. I'm Freddie Stevenson, man of purpose.
This is a passion of mine. The whole premise behind the Jazzie Conversations with Jazz podcast is to spotlight the fact that it is now time for you to get your dope comeback story.
Hey, say Jazzie Conversations with Jazz. Jazzie Conversations with Jazz. Say Jazzie Conversations with Jazz. Jazzie Conversations with Jazz.
Every Monday, I call people into a studio and we dig into their comeback stories, because I know that we see people in their glory and we see people when they're on top, when they can have that silver lining to them, but we all go through some things, right? We all go through some things, and I think once we're real with people and we let people know the trials and tribulations that we've gone through, it only makes us human and it connects one of us.
So I just want to know, what would be your advice to someone who is looking to start their own podcast?
First and foremost, let me back up. Find your voice. What are you going to talk about? Is it something that people want to listen to? How long will your podcast be? What's going to be the consistency of your podcast? Are you going to do it like weekly, daily? Are you going to do it monthly? So once you find that, because that's going to indicate if somebody wants to listen to your podcast or not.
I do know how I'm doing it. I'm doing it with God. I'm doing it because this is a passion of mine. And when you are passionate about something, you're not going to stop. So it really it comes down to how bad do you want it.
Listen, it definitely comes down to how bad you want it. Are you passionate about it? Are you going to go after that thing? And so I know for one that I am a person that will do that. And so you know who I am. I am Jasmar Jazz Bennett. I am your host of the Jazzie Conversations with Jazz podcast. This podcast celebrates the power of the comeback. I truly believe that you can come back from anything with God, using the right resources effectively, and your willingness to do the necessary work. It is a fantastic Monday, October 27th. And so October 27th. I got my days. I have my days mixed up? I am still coming down from my birthday celebration, okay? So it is in fact October 27th today, right? We are 12 days, not one, not two, not three, 12 days away from the most entertaining, informative, exciting, inspirational, motivational live podcast show here in Central Florida. All right. The Jazzie Conversations with Jazz podcast is turning 4. And so for that celebration, we are bringing a live podcast experience like no other here right in Lakeland, Florida at Catapult Lakeland. Tickets are available on eventbrite.com. I will give you a little secret, because I've had several people reach out for tickets. And so I still have a special, but it will not last long. Okay. So tap in. I still have a special going on for my general admission tickets. General admission tickets, a select few general admission tickets have been brought back for 2 for 1. So for 2 tickets, you will only pay the price of 1. Now, with taxes and fees and all of that on eventbrite.com, it comes out to around $45, between $45 and $47, right? That's a steal for the show that you are about to get. Now, VIP, unofficially, is sold out, all right? So, general admission tickets are still available for you. This is going to be an event like no other, okay? This event is bringing not one, not two, but three different panels. My first panel is going to be comprised of Miss Tia Crockett, Miss Sylvia Stevenson, and also Miss Lisa Sunshine. They are going to come to you with the topic of God. How do we use God in the formula to make a comeback? How important is it? They use God every day in their everyday lives, in their businesses, and they are thriving in their own arenas. We're going to focus on forgiveness because a lot of us need to forgive, right? Forgiveness is very important. Panel 2 is comprised of my special panelists who are going to talk to you about using the resources, the right resources effectively. For that panel, we have none other than Miss Markeisha Smith. We also have Tarika Coney, and we will have Norman Harris on that panel. And then for panel 3, we are going to talk to panelists who can teach you and tell you how to do the necessary work. That is the formula for the comeback story. On that panel, I have Mr. Garen Sprav. I also have Sierra Range and Mr. Michael Mariner. But I didn't stop there. I did not stop at 3 panels. Aside and along with those 3 panels, I also have vendors for you. Yes, I will have food vendors there for you. Trust me, we have delectable food, and I will be announcing who those food vendors are this week. We have a mixer, especially for my vendors, from noon to 1 p.m. That is your vendor shopping, that is your entertainment, that is the live DJ, that is your networking hour. And then we move into the 3 different panels. At the end, we will have an R&B day party. I have DJ Kim Blaze on the 1s and 2s, and I also have J Rod. Listen, DJ J Rod, the MC, is going to be performing. And I just added a performance. I will have a live saxophonist, right? We have Mr. Steven Satsy Stevens is going to be in the building, and he is going to be playing us the latest and greatest R&B tunes. We're actually going to take it back as well. Remember, tickets are available on eventbrite.com. I bring this event to you live every single year because I want you to be in the building in a live setting where you're able to network and talk and ask questions to my panelists, and you're able to really experience what you need to. So it is going to be an amazing time. Get your tickets today. All right. And so I really am excited about tonight's episode because, as you know, and as you have been following me, you know that I am definitely a daddy's girl, right? You also know that this podcast was brought about by me following my dreams of becoming a radio personality, having my own show. You know, I have a degree in broadcast journalism from Florida A&M University. And I always talk to you guys about me losing my father was the start of me charging myself to go back after the dream that I had, because he used resources to make sure that I was at NABJ conferences and just did what he could to make sure that all of his children had what they needed. And so, to pay homage to him, I started chasing this dream again. And so that's why we are here. Okay. My special guest is someone who knows all about fatherhood, the absence of having a father, and how he has lived a fantastic life in spite of. And so I want to introduce to you Mr. Barry O. Franklin Sr. He's a storyteller. He's a husband. He's a father. He's a man of faith that in his life embodies resilience and also redemption. Now, he was raised in Brooklyn without knowing his father. Barry learned early that absence can leave questions that echo for decades. Guided by a strong mother and a close-knit family and the grace of God, he chose a path of service. First, as an EMT, where he met people at the most fragile moments of their lives, and later to investigative work, where patience, compassion, and courage mattered as much as any skill. His mentor Through My Father's Absence, his memoir, Through My Father's Absence, The Making of a Man, traces that journey. The boy who longed to be seen, the young man shaped by first love and loss, the protector devoted to his community, and the father determined to break cycles and build legacy. Barry speaks directly to men about responsibility, caring for children, honoring women, and standing for what's right, even when it's costly. He also equips family and faith communities to walk with those carrying father wounds. Whether he's sharing stories from the field or moments at the family table, Barry's message is clear. Forgiveness is strength. Love is a choice, and purpose is built day by day. And so, without further ado, I'm bringing my special guest on the screen. Hello, Mr. Franklin Sr. How are you?
I'm okay. God is good.
Isn't he?
Yes,
Like
he is.
truly and sincerely, he really is good. He really is good. So how are you doing this evening, sir?
A little bit tired, but I'm here. I'm here. You
You said,
know.
if you guys are just tuning in, I see that Austin Butler has checked in. Listen, Austin is someone who works with a group that is a proponent of great fathers. He works with an organization called Team Dad, and he also works with Dad Mode. And so they go around and they teach different skills. They actually have cohorts and classes to teach men how to father. So I'm so glad that you are tuned in, Austin. And so I'm glad I will see you at the podcast event as well. Mr. Barry, I feel like I should have invited you to be a panelist. You came out of the gate in your bio talking about forgiveness, you know?
Well, hey, I'm sure I can talk to my publicist and get it done.
I'm sure you
She
can
got me
back.
on a busy schedule.
Yes, yes, yes.
Just trying to promote this book.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
I'm ready
we
for you.
got you here. I want to find out about you first. And so Brooklyn has always been one of those places on my a bucket list of wanting to go to. And so if you had to describe Brooklyn, first of all, how long, I know you were born in Brooklyn, but how long did you actually live in Brooklyn?
For 18 years.
And if you,
Basically,
uh-huh.
yeah, for 18 years. And then my mother moved us to Far Rockaway, so in
Gotcha.
Queens. So grew up
What do you remember
Mhm.
about what do you remember about Brooklyn at that time?
Okay. So I'm a child of the 60s. So what I remember basically, is that my mother had me at 19 years old. And she lived at a certain period during her teenage life, she lived with her grandmother, who was my great grandmother. And I always call her grandma. So
Yeah.
when they migrated from Birmingham, Alabama, up
Okay.
north, they lived in Brooklyn. They lived on Fulton Street. So at that time, my mother had me. Then 2 years later, she had my brother, who's no longer with us. He passed in 2003. She moved to Hertford Street, which was like right around the block from where they were on Fulton Street. And I met, a whole bunch of friends that I still have to this day.
Yeah.
I remember, being out there in the street and stuff. You had the neighbors watching you and stuff, so
Yeah.
you couldn't do no wrong, and stuff. As they say, it takes a village to raise a child.
Yes, it does.
We had we did our chores, and then we couldn't go outside to play until, the chores were over with, but I remember playing in the street, playing, man, hide and seek,
Mm,
tag, Coco Livio, Red Rover,
yeah.
playing football in the streets and stuff,
Right.
and just, a lot of things were happening at that time in Brooklyn. Um, you know, uh, we had an elementary school right down the block from us,
Okay.
right? But they busted me out. I had to
Okay.
go, if anybody's familiar with Brooklyn, I had to go walk all the way to Atlantic Avenue and Ralph Avenue to catch a school bus. And that
Goodness.
school bus took us about an hour. It's up to going to Midwood district of Brooklyn. So basically predominantly white neighborhood. So went to PS 99. I think I had a good education, got a good, assembly of, about different people, different races and everything like that. And later on, I ended up going to Midwood High School, which was still in the same area. That was a good experience. Some friends are still around. Some friends that unfortunately, seem like the older you get, more people pass away.
Yeah.
But it was a good experience.
Good. Good. I feel like I don't know, I feel like going to Brooklyn, the air is different. I think eclectic. I think art filled. I just feel like I smell it. It just, for me, when I think of Brooklyn, when I see pictures, when I hear people talk about it, it just feels like a family reunion. So how often do you ever go back?
Last time I went to Brooklyn, I guess just in passing. Because like I said, mostly everybody's grown up. Some are still there. Matter of fact, they have a reunion because I kept in touch with one of my good friends that I knew since I was like 3 years old.
Yes.
And they have a reunion where everybody that lived on Hertford Street, they get together and, just, have a good time. Yeah. So we talk about, things that we did, pictures that we shared, just the people who still live around there, who owns the houses and everything. And we just talk about, just different things that, that happen. It was like, the boys, they all hanged out and everything. Yeah. Some look skinny, some look fat, and, I just, gained some weight and everything. I ain't gonna say fat, but just gained some weight. Yes. But it was an experience. More so as I got older and, worked as a, New York City EMS, which was separate than the fire department at the time. I would go through, coming from Kings County Hospital, I would cut through Hertford Street and just see some people. But that was back 1985. Like that. So I'm telling my age, but
Listen, I have sisters that are your age, so you're good.
Okay. Yeah. But it was a good experience, Good. So, hey.
I was looking at your bio though, and it just reads public servant. And whenever I see someone who has such an extensive career in that field, I'm led to ask, why do you think you were so attracted to being a community servant?
Well, this was growing up, I always wanted to be a doctor. Okay. So, after I graduated from Midwood, I had choices and stuff. I ended up getting accepted to Fordham University in the Bronx, City College, Northwestern College and stuff. And I think if I knew more about the HBCUs at the time, I probably would have went, to HBCU, especially since I had family in Alabama, and I would have went back that way because then you always had the security.
Yes.
But I think at the time, I went straight from high school to Fordham University. I didn't stay on campus, but at that time, I didn't even have to pay for college because everything was covered, because you had all types of programs. You didn't have to take out a student loan. You didn't have to ask, they didn't ask at the time, your family income.
Right.
But I think I was having too much fun. So as you go, life just leads you different ways and stuff. So I always took, either went to college, you took civil service exams because at the time, in New York, you take every civil service exam you could and it was free. They didn't charge you for anything. Okay. Not like today. Now they charge you maybe $100 for this, $100 for that. And I said, okay, never wanted to be a police officer, but I took the test. I took New York State Police exam. Okay. I took New York City exam. I took 2 back-to-back exams because just in case you didn't get called on one, you get called on the other. I took corrections. The only reason I took corrections was because I was wondering why a friend of mine was failing the test. And so I took it. I got scored a 98 on that test. They called me right away. I said, "Nah, I want corrections and everything."
Yeah.
So the thing at the time with EMS, I was a emergency medical technician because I worked for a private ambulance company.
Mm-hmm.
And a friend of mine, I was in his wedding party, and he met a chief, and he told him about me.
Uh-huh.
Prior to that, I had an application in there because it was not by civil service exam. It was like, application. And they pulled my application. I got a call. And then it was history from there. But besides taking New York City police tests and stuff, I took Nassau County too.
Okay.
I took that in 87, but I was already I was just coming from EMS to going into New York City Police Academy. I didn't go into that until like 89. So it kind of just fell into me, and I like what I was doing, I guess, especially from EMS, because we worked closely with the cops in Brooklyn.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah. So do you feel like that side of you that wanted to be a doctor, do you feel like that was fulfilled through your work with EMS?
I think so. I still, got that taste for it.
Yeah.
And the thing that was so funny, the only thing, and I worked in EMS when AIDS first came out, the AIDS epidemic first came out.
Gotcha.
And we didn't know what to wear. We were wearing, anti-contamination gear and everything else, and we didn't know how to handle it, like basically the whole world really didn't know how to handle it.
Right.
So we had to do all precautions, because I would say like this. I worked in East New York section of Brooklyn, Brownsville section of Brooklyn. And there were times, especially in the summertime and stuff like that, you would go somewhere and you may have like 4 people shot on a block.
Right.
And you had to go in there, banish them up, call the paramedics, whatever, and take them to the hospitals, take them to a trauma center.
Yeah.
So we were more there to help. So we weren't a threat to anybody, not like when they saw, the police, they were like, okay,
right.
Like that. And I could remember coming home at night, because I worked from 4 to 12. I could come home at night and driving out of Brooklyn, going back to Queens and everything, and hearing gunshots. So just popping up in the air and stuff like that. But that was the type of atmosphere it was.
Wow. So just listening to you and listening to your reading, your bio, in EMS work, you've done some detective work. I'm afraid, if I ever just met someone who was a detective, because I just feel like, you would just know everything, right? And so I'm just always intrigued by people who are like detectives. I'm like, what you don't found out about me being on this podcast? Like, you gave the green light.
We had our sources. I can't let out too many secrets and stuff, but we had our sources.
Well, I'm glad. I am so glad that I passed the test. Okay, so throughout your journey, throughout your journey, it leads up to where you are now. And of course, that's how the journey of life evolves. Like, that's how the journey of life is. And so, your bio speaks of having a strong mother, and my God, there are plenty of days where I have to just label myself as being strong, and your book is really really what I want to get into. And I know it has a lot to do with your comeback story, but you did a memoir. And so this memoir is really a detailed trajectory of your life, but your life specifically living through the absence of your father. But then it talks about the making of a man, so for so many single women out there who are raising our boys, or raising boys in the absence of their father, that whole notion of, will I be able to foster him into the type of man that I want him to become? And what we don't have a lot of the times is the perspective from the child. And so you being a man and have made yourself into the man that you want to be, and I'm sure that you're ever growing into him, you have that perspective. You have that lens of what it felt like as a young boy, maturing into a man. And so is that what you consider to be your comeback story?
Yeah, I definitely consider that my comeback story because, growing up, and it's hard when you don't know that other piece of the puzzle.
Yeah. Was your dad
My
ever
mother.
around? Was your dad ever around?
No, and
Okay.
I can't say it was his fault, and stuff. I guess some people growing up in the South back then and everything. They, she didn't even tell like my grandparents or anything like that. Grandparents, or mother, or anybody who my dad was. So basically, nobody in the family immediately knew. And as a kid, you go to school and you see, other kids with, talk about their fathers. And then you kind of lie saying, oh, well, my dad is such and such, because I guess the embarrassment or the shame that you didn't know who he was.
Yeah.
I did have some strong men in my life, uncles, grandfathers, and everything like that. But that question was always there. And she never really gave me an answer, I guess not till I was like 19.
Wow.
And the thing about it was, and she never told me why, so that bothered me.
What would
My
she say?
brother,
If you don't mind, Mr. Franklin, what would she say?
she wouldn't say anything. She just, at that time, I don't know, they used to have like different type of reunions, school reunions.
Yeah.
So they would go to different states and stuff. So one time it was going to Chicago, and she says, you're going to meet your father because he lives in Chicago. I was like, oh yeah. And stuff, and in my mind, I'm saying, well, why all this time now?
Yeah.
You're coming with that. There was no explanation.
Yeah.
My mother was a difficult person at times and everything, because they believe in old school. The old school, I tell you, old school is if they get you with some of that stuff from old school, I could have locked them up nowadays and stuff like that. Old school,
Yes.
And when we went there, he wasn't there. He was, I guess, down in Alabama. So the journey, I guess, it was still in my mind as an adult and everything. And later on, after, when I go into my first marriage and stuff, I found out, I'm doing a little speed ahead a little bit, but I found out that he passed away in 1988.
Wow. Okay.
So that was hard.
Yeah.
Finding out that. And as we go into the journey, I always said, okay, be my father's not around or whatever the circumstances were and everything. Because even some of my relatives to today, they go, I thought your mother told you. I said, no, she never told me. And then they go, oh, she lied to me. Stuff. But like I said, she's not here to answer that no more because, she's gone and everything. But
I would imagine that in 1988, if he passed away in 1988, because you said that you did do some digging, this was a time where you said in 1985, though you were going through Brooklyn, still going to see some of your, former classmates. So this is when you are an adult. And I would assume what I'm picturing in my brain is that you would go full throttle into finding out, who that other side of you is. And so when you discovered that he'd passed away, how did you find out that information, and have you ever connected with any of
this is what happened with that.
Okay.
So my first wife, Annie, we had, she was from Alabama. She grew up in Alabama. So she lived in Birmingham. So we took a trip down to Birmingham, and somebody had said, well, the person that raised your father is alive. And they took me to the house. And so go to his house, met my great uncle who raised my, raised my father. And he said to me, he says, you know what? He says, your grandmother's still alive. I said, she is. And he took me over to the house, right? Soon as that woman, my grandmother, Gladys Williams
Yeah.
saw me. The first thing she yelled was Jimmy, because my father's name is Jimmy Bailey and
Okay.
stuff. And she said, Jimmy, she said, and she accepted me, opened up with open arms to me. That was a moment, that I could not describe.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It opened up a whole bunch of doors to like all the other relatives on my father's side
Yes.
and everything. And what was so funny about it, during the summers, we would go down to Birmingham, and I remember what my great grandmother said. Yeah, we better watch out who you date and stuff that might be related to you and stuff.
They love to say that. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm like, okay, and stuff, and I have met my aunts my same age. I have a whole bunch of cousins. I got my love for jazz, for blues from one of my uncles.
Yeah.
And everything. And I love all types of music, rap, whatever. Love all types of music. But I got more a love for the blues from them. And I was saying, man, all this stuff I was missing, I could have grown up with these people, and that was like another missing piece, but that piece came together,
Did they ever know about you? Did they ever know about you?
No, never did. Gotcha. But it was a pure acceptance, and everything. Because I guess back in their times, everybody was having kids, whatever, and stuff like that. But it was acceptance, and not for just me, but for other people in the family and stuff like that. And I developed a relationship with my grandmother and stuff until she passed away. She passed away in 2016. Okay. So it was, oh man, it was a beautiful thing. So she told me some things about my father, and I was saying, well, did he ever, love me or whatever? And she says, no, that, circumstances that kept you from seeing him. And somehow they had a baby picture of me. I didn't even know that.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I met my other sister. I have a sister that I was born on the 22nd of June. She was born July 3rd, same year. So, and we had an older one that was the year before.
Yeah.
So 2 other brothers. And so, other sister, all a bunch of nieces and nephews and everything else. And the thing about it is, I could have been in their lives during times that everybody was going through some, terrible times or whatever, good times and the bad times, and maybe being able to lend some advice to them or just listen, have a, opening ear. So my sister, I was laughing because I used to say it to her, well, come down and, come to Long Island, I'll pay for you to come. Oh, can't come, like that and stuff. And we always talked on the phone, but guess when I finally met her face to face? When I went to the first reunion in 23.
Oh my.
And everything, met her and it was like, we just talking. I met some of my nieces and nephews, they're like, hey, uncle, like that. And that was an experience, that was experience by itself. But I would say, that little, at a certain age, like even at 63, that little boy in me was still saying why, questioning and everything, So, and then I noticed too, I guess that, it's like a big family, it's just like so much love. When I went to the reunion this year, it was in Mississippi, right?
Okay.
Lowell County, Mississippi. And this is the first time I ever was in Mississippi. So I got some roots in Mississippi.
Okay.
I remember seeing that movie, Mississippi Burning. I said, you want Mississippi?
I'm just telling you, that's all I think about. I'm just like, I've never been, but yeah, I understand.
But through my journey, I've been to a whole bunch of places I've never been before. So, hey, my son went to school in West Virginia. I went to West Virginia, Buckhannon, West Virginia.
Okay.
So
okay.
Yeah. But that's it. So,
So how do you, because a part of your a part of your messaging is how essential forgiveness is. I love what stated here. Um, in your bio, when you talk about forgiveness, you say forgiveness is strength, love is a choice, and purpose is built day by day. And just
Hmm.
listening to you, um, this is how I know God just he has his hands on, and he has his hands in a lot of things, because when I was reading your bio, a part of my comeback formula is that you have to have God. You have to seek him first. Like,
Yes.
to come out of your storm, but to go through your successes, your valleys and your mountaintops as well. Like, God has to be in everything. And
Hmm.
so I didn't just want to focus on just God. I wanted to focus on the power of forgiveness on this first panel during my live podcast anniversary show, right? And so
Hmm.
here it is. I see it in your bio where you talk about forgiveness being strength. And so I'm listening to you throughout this story, and I am trying to put myself in your position, and I would have so much of a missing space. I would have so much of built up feelings. I don't want to say anger. Because well, I may want to say anger or being
Okay.
upset, or um just thinking, life may have been unfair when it comes to not being able to know who my father was. If I've asked, and I could have, reunited and reconnected with family. And then as you grow older, I think you sometimes give grace to people who you have those feelings towards, especially like you said, back in the day or during their time, because they just were raised differently. And then you never know
Yeah.
what someone went through. And the magical word in that is giving and extending grace, but we are all human, right? And so when it
Yes.
comes to forgiveness, I find myself going in and out of it, in and out of
Hmm.
it. And it's just like, I
Hmm.
know forgiveness is the right thing to do, but I can't help that I still feel these things. And
Hmm.
so how did your feelings, what were your feelings for your mother during this time? And then over time,
Well,
how did they change?
I love my mother, but some things like I said, I had certain things that, with relationships, I didn't tell her who I was dating and everything else like that. I didn't really want her to be involved in that, because sometimes she would try to be involved with it, but no, not with me, and stuff
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
Um, the whole thing is, and that's still a phrase for Tyler Perry, where he says, when you forgive somebody and stuff, you forgive them for yourself.
Yeah.
And if you forgive them, you don't bring back that same thing that you forgave a person for. So, I still to this day, maybe she had her reasonings, or maybe out of fear, maybe out of, you know, jealousy that, because he chose the other woman instead of her. I met his wife, and
Okay.
the only thing I could do is just embrace her.
Mm.
Give her a hug and just embrace her. You know, and I learned that basically in life, okay, you have to have God first, because if I didn't have God on my side, I couldn't
Yeah.
do those jobs I did.
Yeah.
There came some situations that that only God had saved me through. You
Mm-hmm.
know, there came some circumstances that, hey, I could have been dead in the grave. I could have been, one time somebody said shoot the cop, and I was the cop.
Mm.
You know,
Yeah.
and everything. So I've worked, like I said, I worked in Queens. I worked 1 year where we had the highest murder rate in the borough of Queens. You know, but I had some good people around me. I have
Yeah.
good people that basically, that shared stories that we talked about. And I seen some good in some of the kids that I had to deal with, you
Mm-hmm.
know. And I remember, you look at the same kids that was out there on the corner slinging drugs and everything else. And you said, man, if you put that same energy into a legit business, you
Right.
could go far, because there were some intelligent kids, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So, and I seen basically what it was, because if you actually look at it, you have a child that's lost without a parent in their
Mm-hmm.
life. And sometimes it comes because, because either the man or the woman have an argument with each other and everything, and they don't want the other, the child, him or her, in the child's life. That's wrong, because the first love a daughter is going to have is for her dad, and the first love a boy is going to have is for his mom. As a dad teaches you how to respect a woman, how to be a man, a mom teaches you love and everything. And they say sometimes a man, boy, the first thing they look for in a woman is somebody like their mother,
Have you found that?
I think I had some pretty good women in my life.
Okay.
I think I had some pretty good women in my life,
Yes.
Like I said, some that taught me lessons, some hard ones and some good ones.
Yeah.
And I know tragedy, I lost my first wife and stuff, she had epilepsy. I came home and stuff and found her unconscious and, cardiac arrest. And my two little, two kids were there. And I'm doing CPR on her and everything, and mouth to mouth. And I just said, I can't do it no more. And just because I was in law enforcement, they transported her to the hospital.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, 3 years later, I married again. And now I'm dealing with, with my present wife that we've been married now 30 years.
Yeah.
And she has, dementia, Alzheimer's and dementia and everything. And, it's points where she doesn't even know who I am.
Yeah.
And everything. So you come across that. So forgiveness, I learned to forgive no matter what somebody did to me or, tried to hurt me. And everybody I ever came into cross and stuff like that, I treated them the way I wanted to be treated. I treated them with respect and stuff. But if I had to be hard, I'll be hard. But but that's it. It's
do you truly believe when it's coming down to forgiveness though, how do you feel about the statement when people say you can forgive a person, but that does not mean that you have to stay connected to that person or you have to even ever talk to that person again? How do you feel about that statement when they say that?
Well, like I said, forgiveness to me is for that person, for myself.
Yeah.
And you can forgive somebody, but you just don't forget what brought you into that situation, because God shows us forgiveness and stuff. So we're trying to be closer to God at times. So we have to forgive, So, you look back and like all that pain and stuff like that I suffered through and stuff like that, and it's hard at times.
It is.
I mean, it's very hard at times. But you just have to learn to forgive.
Yeah. So your memoir, when it's talking about through the absence of your father, but then it's talking about the making of a man, what advice, what principles, what advice can a young man gain from your book? Because how do you feel that you were able to become a man in the absence of your father?
Well, it was a struggle. And what I'm trying to say to young men is no matter how sometimes we seem like we are in a deep, dark hole. Yeah. And that there's no way out. That don't give up on life. And so, because if you're on the bottom, the only way else is up. And so, and sometimes I believe in therapy, plain and simple.
Right. Good.
Old school, they be like, oh, you don't need to talk to nobody, blah, 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 and stuff like that. No, I believe in therapy. Absolutely. But, I had to have 2 hip replacements, and that's because of my child and stuff like that, Wow. And going through the stuff with my wife, I had some therapy.
Yeah.
And that was one of the persons that were like, you need to write a book. You got a whole bunch of stories, because it's funny. You could be a cop, you could be EMS, you could be whatever. And people want to know, so what did you ever do? Is when you talk to the young kids at elementary school, you ever shoot somebody? No, I ain't never shoot nobody. Opportunity came there, but I
Yeah.
didn't. You know, and you just have to just talk to somebody. You know, unfortunately, I had a cousin as that I didn't know about that she took her own life
Mm.
and everything, and it was sad. You know, I've seen people who take their lives. I've seen, cops killed. I've been to the many police funerals and everything. And, it's bad enough that, sometimes one person does something and everybody else says, oh, they all like that.
Yeah.
But nah, we all not like that. We don't go to work and say we're going to kill somebody today.
Mm-hmm.
You just want to come home and we want to just protect the public and try to do the best job we can. So I was always respectful and everything, where I told somebody, I said, okay, this is the reason I stopped you. And they would wonder why. And I say, okay, let me play the radio. Headquarters, what was the description? And so, and they dealt with that. The history of policing and stuff like that goes back, but 18 somethings and stuff like that, where first they were going after slaves and stuff like that, but it's always been corruption. And no matter how much money a person makes, they're still going to be corrupt. And
I
stuff,
agree.
but not all people are corrupt.
Yeah.
So,
do you
and then some,
it sounds like, do you feel like your career is what taught you how to be a man?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. Because the stuff that I've seen, the stuff that I dealt with, I think that made it. And then having my children too.
I was just about to ask you, what type of father are you? Yeah.
I make mistakes. We all make mistakes because there's no book on how to be a parent and everything.
I wish there was,
but
I'm pretty sure people have tried to write the book, and I just don't know. It's never going to be a one size fit all, but sometimes you just wish, Lord, just give me.
Yeah, because you got to treat different children different ways.
Yes,
it.
Yes,
is because some of that time out don't work with all the kids. Absolutely. And everything. And dealing with juveniles, when I had to do that as a detective, it was so funny that the parents are afraid of their children. Like, I can't do nothing to them because they call the police.
Right.
And I'm like looking, I said, well, I had to quote something of criminal procedure law. Criminal procedure law said you can do corporate punishment, but you cannot use a weapon. And kids look at me like, oh, you can't? The funny thing is, I had to deal with a 12-year-old. This 12-year-old had a bunch of other kids 16-year-old kids going back in people's backyards and stuff and stealing bikes, right? So, of course, the 16-year-olds, I caught the case. The 16-year-olds, I charged them as adults and stuff at that time. Now, I know the laws have changed in New York. And I had the 12-year-old. The 12-year-old was just coming from family court, and it was a hot summer day. So we have a special room for juveniles and everything. So he's coming there. His mother has a younger daughter and him. And I'm talking to this kid. This kid is slouching down and everything like that. Oh, I'm tired. I said, okay, let me speak in language that you understand. I'm not going to repeat what I said and stuff like that. So he said to his mother, he said, Mom, you going to let this detective talk to me like that? She said, you were disrespected to the detective. So at that time, I took the mother out of the room and I had another detective come in there and sit with the child. And I said, when did he start acting this way? She said, when he turned 12 years old and everything. I said, is his father around? No. So it's like you need, even if a child, let them get to know their father, let them get to know their mother, because they'll develop their own opinion later on.
Yeah.
Just let them have that experience.
Yeah.
And if it wasn't for strong men in people's lives, they wouldn't be the way they are.
I agree. There's so much research that talks about how important a father is in the life of a child, like even from cutting down discipline to
Mm-hmm.
empowering them to do their very best in school,
Mm-hmm.
simply by having proximity, simply by having those conversations with them and being active, and I've always found that research to be very, very interesting. And so I love men who go through no I love men who would prefer not to make excuses and to stop at nothing to be in the lives of their children. And I've over the years talked to several people who just did not see a way that they could make an impact in the lives of their children because of the relationship that they had with the mother. And I used to
Yes.
always tell them ways around it. I would use like my personal experience. If I'm not with the father of my child, I'm the type of woman that I'm never going to stop him from wanting, or from being able to be there, because you can't make somebody want to be there,
Yeah,
but
that's true.
you can definitely not hinder the process of them being there. And so I would just say, I would just give them advice. Like if it were me, this I am a person who welcomes it, because I want an active dad.
Mm-hmm.
Money is very important. And even at this point, I'm going to say it again, money is very important. But
Mm-hmm.
what's really, really important, even over that, not saying that you don't need money, but
Yeah.
what's really more important than that is just the relationship that you forge with your children, because they
Yeah.
need to know that you care. They need to know that they need to see that you will be able to fit them in your schedule. They need to see
Mm-hmm.
that you will go to no ends to make sure that they are fine in academics, in sports, emotionally, spiritually. The man
Mm-hmm.
has a heavy load in the role that he plays in his family. And so I am just a huge proponent, just because I had a great father, and I want that for my two boys as well, regardless of what the relationship with their father is.
Mm-hmm.
And so in your book, I know that you state that you show people um how to be caring. You speak directly to men about being responsible, about caring for their children, honoring women, standing for what's right even when it's costly. How do you do that in your book, or how do you do that in your way of life, in your way of work?
Well, sometimes it gets difficult,
Yeah.
and I've always talked to, like, especially as talk to kids. I didn't care what race and everything else like that. And I said to them like this. I said, first of all, you don't want a cop to know you, because when they know you, they know exactly where to go. And I had examples of that, with dealing somebody robbed a store, and guess where I went? Right to their mother's house. Said,
Mm-hmm.
you know where his son is and stuff. And I dealt with this child prior and everything. When I dealt with him, he was a little high and he was naked. He didn't want to come and everything.
Mm-hmm.
But looking for him. And then when I saw him, I said, do you remember me?
Yeah.
Oh, you were the detective that came to my mama's house. And stuff. I said, yeah. And everything. He said, oh, I apologize to you because, I was high at the time, you
Mm-hmm.
know. We have to, we have to get out there and we have to reach out to some of these kids. Some of these kids, and the big brothers and everything, that's fantastic, but we have to see what the problem is and just deal with it. Just try to help them out. Even if it's a complete stranger, take them, because in the city, I used to, with community policing, well, I did part of that. We used to take the kids to, like, baseball games or different other
Okay.
activities.
Mm-hmm.
And just to show them that, yeah, there are some people that want to be in their lives. And I've seen some good men too, that, they might not have been with their child's mother and stuff, and they gave freely. Yeah, this is my child and stuff like this. And they didn't even have to go to court and
Right.
stuff, and they just, gave support and everything. But we just have to be out there to support, our boys, our girls,
Yeah.
and just try to do the best. And I think about, it takes a whole village to raise a child
It
and
does.
everything. Especially when I was growing up, we had that little nosy neighbor that told
Yeah.
on you
Yeah.
and gave you a little tap on your butt and stuff like that. Then you got tapped on your butt when your mama got there or something,
Yes.
But
Yeah.
but I think, I think sometimes we get away from that,
Yeah.
because everybody's worried about,
It's a different age. It's a different time. It's a different age. Yeah.
yeah, but we need more of that.
Yeah.
Because we got too many children that they start off and they start off as a bad seed and they just go and fester, and then who's going to be taking care of them?
Yeah.
And it's not like it's video games and stuff where you could shoot the thing, or like Bugs Bunny and Wile Coyote and everything, where they blow dynamite and all of a sudden he's back again. It's not like that.
Not like
Once that bullet is fired out the gun, that's it. Life's over.
Yeah.
So I think we all, need to try to help and try to do something.
We have this guest at Cisco 9027 says, good discussion on the importance of a father. Can't wait to read the book. And I wanted to ask you, when people read this book, because your second portion to this memoir is the making of a man.
Mm-hmm.
If you had to give a descriptor of what a man is, if you were talking to a young boy, whether it be someone that you've had to deal with in your experience of law enforcement, someone who's lost their way, just someone who's eager, who's a straight A student, but he does not have a father, how would you describe what a man should be to him?
I think that a man should be a person that's a mentor,
Mm-hmm.
that should be there for, even though he's not in that woman's life and everything, but he should be there for that child. Because they're going to have questions. They're going to have a question of what I do this time? What do I do that time? And, sometimes we could tell, kids look at us and say, as parents, oh, but that didn't happen to you. But they don't know we've been there before them,
Yeah.
And no matter what we teach them, they still got to learn for themselves.
Right.
And we hope whatever we instill in a child, that later on that same thing comes back to them.
Right.
It's like with my son. I taught him how to do this, cut the grass, and do all this other stuff. Produce a snowblower and everything. And when he came back when he came like on his visits from college and stuff like that, I didn't even have to say nothing to him. He knew what to do and everything. And your daughters, they know what to do, cooking or whatever and stuff like that. I have one daughter that's a chef, and others that, other business, responsibilities.
Yes.
But we have to be there. Being there might mean more than just anything else.
Right. So
be there. Be honest and stuff.
On it. That's definitely, yeah. So being honest, being responsible. I'm trying to think of other things like God fearing. I would think that,
Yeah. Well, see, another thing, my grandmother raised up in the church, so,
yes,
and everything. But but those lessons, that background always comes back, and so prayer works, and it's funny how something happens and the first thing we say, thank God.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but we get not just have faith, but we got to do the work also.
Mm-hmm.
I always say, if I could just save one child or one person, then I did a good job.
Yes.
It made me feel good that one time when I was still in uniform, this kid came up to me, he says, Officer Franklin, he said, if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't have went to the Marine Corps. Mm-hmm. And that felt so much joy, just thinking that I touched that one child's life. Mm-hmm. Or some other children that I came across and everything, and they did good. And then some that you just lose, Mm-hmm. I think that's the hardest feeling to lose one.
Yeah.
Is because they have so many, and I think sometimes that's the reason why children join the gang, because they don't have that love at home.
Yeah.
And everything. Yeah. So they're looking for love.
They are.
So, but that's it. So we just have to do our best, and I'm hoping that my story will help somebody else. They always say everybody has a book and everything, some people may have more than one book. Yeah. And you probably gonna see more than one book from me.
Okay.
You
So
know,
just
this,
go ahead. I don't want to cut you off.
you know, so this is, you know, I want people to know me as the writer, as an author. I want them to know that this is the story that I told in my life, that maybe that story that I tell can help you out, that can help somebody else out and everything. So, you know, that's it.
I feel like, you know, your story is one definitely that is very beneficial to tell, to get, you know, be able to get the book and to hear your story. But it is a true tale and a true testament of not letting how you grow up dictate the man that you are going to become, and becoming a man in spite of your circumstances and law enforcement, and being an EMS, basically being that epicenter of the man that you are to become, in that role of being a servant leader to the community. You know, you were exposed yourself to men who were leaders, you know, men who had substance, who had values, who had morals, who had boundaries, you know. And I think that component of your story will resonate, you know, with the audience. And so I wanted to ask you in closing one of two things.
Okay.
First, one of the traits, what is one of the traits that you possess as a man that you're most proud of?
My caring for people, not to look at somebody because of their circumstance or where they live at or where they came from, you know, because everybody's not a villain. Everybody's not a crook and stuff like that, you know. And I always tell somebody, you know, even when I had to process them and stuff like that, I have had fights with people and stuff like that. But as I always say, once the handcuffs go on, the fighting stops. I had one person that fought with me, and so when I got him in the cell to process him, he started crying. He said, "I had a bad day."
Yeah.
I said, "Okay, you know, nothing personal, just business." You know, but you know, like I say, you know, life's not easy. You know, we can make it that way, but we have to have strong faith and just believe. Don't give up. Don't give up on anything.
Yeah.
You know, some people feel they lose their superpower, but don't lose your superpower.
Right.
You know,
Absolutely not.
you know, you feel like you got kryptonite coming at you, but no.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, anybody could turn themselves around. I'll give somebody a second chance. Now, when it comes to third chance, now you might just say, okay, but
Listen,
you know,
had I taken your advice, don't me stop.
yeah, you know. So they say, let go, let God. But you know, you know,
And so I see that you're currently on Instagram, and definitely viewers, I want you to make sure you go to that page, you follow him, you like, you subscribe, because his Instagram is at barryo.franklin_books, right? And so how can we purchase your book, sir?
Okay. Well, you have my what's it? So I have a website for books. It's going to be, some books are going to be on Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, Books A Million, and what else? And Walmart. You know.
Okay, so you have left no stone unturned. So you're definitely going to be easy to find. And so the book is called Through My Father's Absence, correct? Through My Father's Absence, The Making of a Man. And so
Making of a Detective. Making of a Detective.
The Making of a Detective. Got you. The Making
Yep.
of a Detective. That makes sense now. Makes perfectly good sense now, Barry. Jeez Louise. Okay.
You know, but you know, the whole thing is a making of a man too, is making of a detective.
It is. Yeah.
You know, and that's it. And you know, it just tells some people, you know, that okay, it's okay to choose some of those civil service jobs, because they do have a good pension and everything, you know. And just be, you know, and one thing I could say to somebody, if you do choose a job like that, treat people the way you want to be treated. And that's one thing I said when I was signing off on the day I retired. And I said, hey, treat people the way you want to be treated. Absolutely. And then you go a long way. And we have a book launching on November 7th.
Where's that book launch going to be?
It's called Tap That Beer House in Davenport.
Yeah,
it's right in the.
We didn't tell them that you are, you're in Polk County now. So,
I'm in Polk County. I'm in Polk County, but we do have some other events, and I'm gonna try to make it to your event too. I got to talk to my publicist about that now and everything because she got me a heavy schedule. You know,
I would love for people to be able to see you. You know, it's. I feel like it's only right that you do. You have your book launch on the 7th, which is Friday. Come on over to the podcast anniversary live show. Bring some books with you. And
I would like you to come to my book launch on November 7th.
I hope I will have the strength to do that because I would love to meet you in person and come to the book launch. I would love to do that. I definitely will, all the way in Davenport.
Well, I'll make sure you get the information for it.
Yes, please do. Please do. If it's one thing that you can tell me about your work in the field of being a detective, what is it that a detective must have? What skill set?
Okay. First of all, common sense.
Yes.
Okay. You have to have common sense. You have to be you know, you have to be objective. You have to really get into things, you know, because it's like being a mad scientist. You got to get knowledge of everything that you do. You know, when you're doing the investigation, you got to look at everything, you know, look around, look at your surroundings, look at who's around you, look at that person that might look, you know, kind of suspicious and stuff like that. You know, the things that happen like with the domestic violence or, you know, you see in, of course, in many stories, the first thing they look at is the spouse, or in a murder, they look at a spouse and stuff like that.
But that's like the number one thing, you know, when we look at these criminal shows and these detective shows, everybody always thinks that in your career is the percentage lending itself to that. Like that is typically where it is.
You know what it is? And I used to laugh because my wife was saying, why are you hollering at the TV? I said, because they're doing it wrong. We wouldn't do it like that, you know? And stuff. I said, first of all, if we got to put a person in the cell, we ain't gonna have a gun on us, you know? And so it's, I mean, it comes to sometimes like some cases, man, it's a lot of work. When I first became a detective, the social media they had was MySpace, right?
Oh, and my gosh. You really brought some memories back.
You know, and you know, they were doing cyberbullying then with MySpace. Yeah. And I knew I could do too much and stuff. I threatened to lock up a whole high school and said, this stuff don't stop. It's stuff like that. I'm gonna lock everybody up. They just stop.
Lock everybody up. Yeah.
You know, and everything. And I just tell people, just watch it because you know you got fraudsters going out there trying to scam seniors and stuff like that, talking about, oh, I got a family member, you got to get bailed out. Watch that. You know, but you really, you know, just tell the truth too, please. Yeah. You know, and everything, and be more observant of what's around you and everything. You know, especially in these times. You know, whatever. I need
to talk to you because this world of dating, I need you to give me some skills, some detective skills. Like where do I need to go first to make sure that this is a good person?
Yeah. You know, you gotta watch body language, you gotta watch gestures, you gotta, you know, and so you can tell when somebody lied. And most of the time we have our answers before we start talking to you. You know, so
yes.
Yeah. You know, but you gotta be a good investigator. That's it. And it was funny. I had some people that mistake,
Is it the eyes true? Like whether you like when a person is talking to you, if they look to the left or they look, what is it? They look to the right, they're lying, or they
They
look to the
look
left.
at different things like body language. Like if somebody's acting more protective, if they're okay, say if the couples together, that's
Yeah.
up, and you can tell when somebody loves each other because if they start going like this and not that closeness, there's something up, going wrong. You look at the eyes, you look at it, if somebody's shaking or something like that, way they talking, if they look like that, while you asking them a question and everything. So it's a whole bunch of things that you have to look at,
Yeah.
different hues. But more than anything, before you start interrogating somebody, you have to, really know what investigate what you're doing and stuff before you do it.
Yeah.
So, but
So what's one of the main cases that you have solved that you're proud of?
okay. Well, when I was in uniform and everything, we had this 14-year-old, and we thought he was like, I was doing community policing, and we thought the kid was, I thought he was 16 or so. So my partner, I'm seeing her grabbing him, rushing him out of the store, but they called it bodega. We called it grocery store, but it was a bodega. Is that
Yeah.
right? And I'm like, what the world? I got out of the van, we grabbed him and stuff, and we took him to the precinct. So we found out that he wasn't 16. We found out he was 14.
Mm.
So his mother, she we called her, you come get your son. She already had one son in Rikers Island already. She didn't really want to get the son. So eventually she came and got the son. So 2 days later, I'm on my days off. I get a call from the squad. And like, Barry, I said, yeah. I said, you remember that kid that you guys had grabbed the other day and stuff? I said, yeah, what's up? He had murdered somebody. Is up.
Wow.
He chased this person into a church and killed him.
Mm-hmm.
And it was over some drugs.
Mm-hmm.
We did our due diligence and we finally grabbed the kid and stuff like that. And basically he got a slap on the wrist.
Mm-hmm.
But every time this kid would see me in uniform, he would run the other way.
Oh wow. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But there's a whole bunch of stories. Is
yeah.
What you see.
Go ahead.
What you see in the book and what you hear in the book, there's much more.
Wow. And so do you think it's going to be like a part 2 to this book so that we can hear like all of the stories? Because I doubt that you put all of the stories in there. Or did you?
Well, it may. It may. So, it may.
It may.
But I think the book is going to be, writing the book was a healing process for me.
Okay.
And it's gonna pull your emotional heartstrings.
Yeah.
It will,
Yeah.
because just, talking about certain things that still get me emotional, especially when it comes to my wife and everything, that gets me emotional, so, but like I said, some of you have stories, you haven't heard all of them, and all the police stories, you haven't heard all of them.
Yeah.
Just gotta wait and see. But I think everybody will enjoy the book.
Yeah. I have so many people that I'm going to share this with, and even past this episode, to share this episode with, because we are talking about we're talking about two things in conjunction. We're talking about, the absence of a father, and then the making of a detective, because that's your personal story into how you were led into this career path, but then how you've been a mentor, how you've been that strong voice for the kids who did not have fathers, and then what you have learned from, being that servant leadership and also going into that detective. And so, Mr. Franklin, I cannot wait to dig more into the book. I cannot wait until, I want to just say, let's just make it a bestseller. Like, I know you didn't just sit there and write the book and just say, hey, I just want to go into a bookstore. I know you want to be a bestseller, right? And so
yes, I do.
Let's try to help him do that, Jazzie Crew. Make sure you purchase the book. Make sure you purchase In the absence of my father, the making of a detective.
I'm sorry. I just let you go on and say what you're going to say.
I am not going to say.
I had to correct you sooner or later, but I'm trying not to be too much of a detective and stuff like that, being authoritative and stuff.
Have a discussion outside of this podcast episode, okay? Is what I'm going to say to you, okay? That's what we're going to do. But yeah, but the framing of your answers to the questions definitely makes sense, and it lends itself to the work that you did as a detective. And then definitely I feel like that uncovering of your family roots on your father's side was a testament to, some detective work that you did, personal work, and yeah, with your detective work, I'm pretty sure you gave a lot of families closure. I'm pretty sure that understanding the importance of forgiveness gave you closure on some tough cases that you had to cover, and to do research on. And I definitely like I said, I definitely will be sharing your book. I'm thinking about a whole police department. Do you work any at all, like with the Lakeland PD?
No, I didn't. Basically, after I retired from like Nassau County, Long Island, basically it was like, I ain't doing no more police work. I'll give some advice and stuff, but I said my days of chasing people and stuff is over with. I
feel like when you
I do give good advice, but like I said, different states got different laws and everything like that. I do belong to Polk County Fraternal Organization, FOP Lodge.
Okay.
I belong to them. I still get in touch with my guardian people on Facebook and and a lot of friends and stuff. Because I failed to realize, to tell you too, I was a transit cop also when they was 3 separate departments.
Okay.
And stuff. So I started off as a transit from EMS to a transit cop. Then I rolled over to the city. And then I went to Nassau County because Nassau County was paying more than the city, at the time. They still do and everything. But but the cost of living is, it's high. But but that's it. So I moved to Florida. I retired April 2016. November 2016, I was down here.
Yeah.
So
that's great.
Sunshine thing.
I was gonna say you're coming down, you're a snowbird, you're coming down and living the life. And hopefully you will not have to worry about any hurricanes or anything like that this season.
Well, no, don't talk. Let them keep on going out to the ocean.
Facts. Please and thank you. Please and thank you. So
yeah, definitely.
Do you feel like you have fulfilled your purpose?
I think so, but I think I'm not done yet, though. I really think, and like I said, I think God's got other purposes for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and that helps me to heal. It helps me to, go through what I'm going through. It's not easy, and everybody's like, yeah, Barry, but sometimes I need a break and, but it's just not easy.
Yeah, it's not. Being a caretaker is not. And Alzheimer's is a difficult disease to watch. And so I will definitely keep you and your wife in my prayers, your whole family. And I love hearing different stories from different people, understanding and hearing what they've gone through and how that has shaped who they are. And so I really do appreciate you taking this time out on the Jazzie Conversations with Jazz podcast to talk about your life, the journey that got you to this point. And we are definitely going to purchase the book at your website, on Walmart, at Amazon. And we're definitely going to subscribe and follow you on Instagram at barryo.franklin_books. And so any closing words, sir, before we wrap this interview up?
Well, I appreciate you.
Absolutely.
I appreciate you being my first podcast. I mean, and I definitely, as time goes by, I hope you come to the event. I'm gonna make sure you get some information to the event.
Please do.
And and I just tell people just to be strong.
Yeah.
And God's good. Yeah, He's good.
Absolutely. He is.
Definitely,
Well, thank you
definitely.
so much for that. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for your expertise in the knowledge and the subject matter of your book. Definitely pick up your copy, Jazzie Crew. All right. And so this wraps up episode 166 of the Jazzie Conversations with Jazz podcast. I am your host, Jasmine Jazz Bennett. Make sure you like, you follow, you subscribe over on IG, Facebook, YouTube, and your favorite podcast platform. Let's support Mr. Barry O. Franklin Sr. at his book launch. I'm pretty sure he'll sign some of your books if you are there in person. It's going down November 7th. Tell us the location one more time and the time.
Okay, it's called Tap That Beer House. It's on 1792 in the Publix Mall. It starts from 6:30 to 9 o'clock.
Awesome. So thank you so much. And I hope you have an exceptional night. And those of you who are watching, remember, there is power in the comeback. I believe that you can come back from anything with God, using the right resources effectively and your willingness to do the necessary work. I will see you back here next Monday for episode 167. And I will definitely see you on November 8th at my live podcast event. Tickets are available on eventbrite.com.
I got one more thing to say to you. Okay.
Yes, go ahead.
They had to purchase tickets, but the tickets are free. So I'll make sure you have the information.
Thank you so much. And then likewise, let's task each other. So likewise, I got you too,
All
Barry.
right.
All right. All you have to do is tell me, put you on the guest list. I got you.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. And so hang on after this for a second. All right. So we will see you later, guys.